Our next contest of the Better Photography Weekly Challenge is People at Leisure. Our judge and mentor is Akshay Mahajan. He is an artist whose endeavors focus on social documentary driven by research-led self-initiated projects that combine his interests in the myth, folklore, and photography as a mirror to culture and collective memory. His professional engagement with the visual arts also takes shapes through writing, teaching, and curation. In 2008, he co-founded blindboys.org, an open collective leveraging technology aimed at reclaiming public spaces, both online and offline, to showcase photography. Mahajan is also a member of photo editorial at Pix Quarterly, a contemporary photography publication. He is a collaborator with Goa Familia, a photographic archive of people's stories and memories drawn from Goan family history. In 2019, he was a co-curator at Goa Festival and the Serendipity Arts Festival. He lives in Goa. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Nilofer. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you again for inviting me to judge this weekly contest. It's a real honor. You said the topic for this weekly contest is people at leisure. And I like this theme because just like photography, it is a very ambiguous theme, and photographs are all about how a photographer interprets a theme. And this leaves a lot of scope for the photographer to fill in these blanks. Like I've said, the photograph kind of triggers an idea. This in turn urges a viewer who looks at the photograph to dig deeper in his or her memory bank and then build meaning. And the magic of the photograph is that it can create million such readings. And those readings might be very different from the urge of the photographer to take that picture. Seeing comes before words. We have been seeing much, I think seeing comes before words because there's something we actually see before we can form words. Every time we look at a photograph, we are aware, however slightly, of the photographer selecting that site from an infinity of other possible sites. The photographer's way of seeing is reflected in their choice of subject. So here we are seeing a multitude of different photographers and how they're interpreting dance, which is a kind of could be seen as a reflection of leisure, which is an old theme as we saw from different pictures. It started from a cave painting in central India to a temple relief in northern India, to how photographers would interpret the subject. And if a photographer has an idea, the idea could be as simple as dance, but it could be interpreted in as many possible ways as there are beings and as many possible forms of interpretation. So I have a question. Who are you and how does it reflect in your choice of subject? And I think this is a very important question when we are photographing anything, because even though we think that the act of photography is separate from oneself, we are making all these subconscious decisions about what we photograph, how we photograph, where we photograph, and beyond just the technicals of whether I shoot in black and white or color or film or digital. So I think photographs in various ways, you cannot remove the photographer from the picture. And if you look at it that way, it is kind of a form of self-expression, and in many ways, a form of communication. And that's what we're seeing online these days on things like Instagram, where people are using images almost like a vocabulary. It's become almost like an alphabet where just images is a form of communication. So we have to come back to asking simple questions like, why are you photographing, who you are, and how does that reflect in what you want to photograph? And these are simple questions, but make great leaps possible in your photography practice. So I want to tell you this a little story, which was written by this photographer called John Moore, and he's a Swiss photographer, and he came up with this little catalog of a series of photographs he had taken and the story behind the photographs. And this one is called Stranger Who Imitated Animals. I was visiting my sister, who lives in the university town of Aligarh in India. The previous evening, when I first arrived, she had warned me, don't be surprised if you're woken up early in the morning. There's a young girl, a neighbor, who is blind, but who likes to know what is happening. She may well come to see you, who the new arrival is. Tired by the long journey in the train that had stopped at every station, I quickly fell asleep. And then I awoke next morning. It took me several minutes to remember where I was. I could hear something scratching near the window, a fingernail slightly rasping against a mosquito net. A young blind girl said, "Good morning." The sun had been up for several hours. Without realizing, I replied to her by yapping like a dog. Her face froze for a moment. Then I imitated a cat, and then the expression on her face behind the netting changed to one of recognition and complicity in my play acting. I went on to a peacock's cry, a horse whinnying, a large animal growling, like a circus. With each act, and according to our mood, her expression changed. Her face was so beautiful. Without stopping our game, I picked up my camera and took some pictures of her. She will never see the photographs. For her, I shall simply remain the invisible stranger who imitated animals. And and this is what I was telling you about earlier, is that you might never know the story behind the picture, but sometimes it's these, like, for example, these are the pictures in the story, and it's interesting to actually look at even single photographs from as moments that you're attracted to. And you can see now the mystery has the sort of the mystery of the photograph has been lifted, but you can see why you were attracted to the pictures in the first place, of this black and white picture of this beautiful girl who's blind and the smiling on the left-hand side. So we go to a second question. Leisure is about comfort. So how do you show respect to your subject and make them comfortable to the intrusion of your camera? So when you're photographing people at leisure, so they're at leisure, sometimes if you, the camera could be seen as an obstruction. So how do you create that intimacy? How do you create that connection with your subject? Do you make animal calls at them like John Moore, or you find your own way to make them comfortable and to show them respect? And in that respect you're showing, then you can capture a true moment of intimacy, a true moment of leisure. Like this picture from Mitch Epstein on the left, where I think husband and wife are caught in such a moment of intimacy. So there's this folkloric saying, which I like. Do you know the legend about grasshoppers? They say they are souls of poets who cannot keep quiet because when they were alive, they never wrote poems they wanted to. And I think the same applies to photographers. So don't try to take pictures that you think other photographers are taking. Always try to take pictures that you actually want to. Your leisure could differ from person to person. Like some people like to run 5 kilometers in the morning. That's hugely relaxing for them, and that's their idea of leisure. Some people would like, they want to sleep all day, and other people might want to, go to a rave or a party and, dance the night away. Might be very strenuous to you or me, who want to stay at home, but to them, that is their idea of leisure. So the idea of leisure is not necessarily a man who's sleeping on the side of the street. That might be an idea of rest, but it's the interpretation of leisure. Or for example, if the lovely little illustration on a painting on the side is of, let's say, a grandmother braiding her granddaughter's hair, and the leisure could be a memory of a time you were really comfortable and at leisure, and that could be something from your past, like that memory that you shared with your grandmother. And so here are kind of different interpretations of what leisure could be, both photographically and through painting. The painting on the left is actually called, it's not as leisurely as you would think. It's called News of Gandhi's Assassination. But at the same time, it is kind of the practice of reading in a public space could be seen as a kind of distraction, just as listening to music could be. Or these pictures by Raghuveer Singh from the men in Rajasthan eating an ice cream, or the boys near Barganga Tank in Bombay playing marbles, or the girls on the swing. So it could be anywhere. It could be more. It could be very direct pictures of the street, but then even family photographs can be seen as leisurely portraits, intimate portraits of your parents or your children, or just all those kind of things can be also seen as leisurely. For example, there were pictures in the earlier slides of this motif of leisure in painting of the reclining woman, which you will see all the way back to, again, it's a repeating motif, just like the dancing girl. It's a reclining woman is a repeating motif. So coming back to the idea of intimacy. So you can see it in your subject's eyes if you trust a person, and trust is the most intimate thing. And that can be reflected in various ways. This is these are two paintings by this painter from Kerala, Tom Vazukuti. And you can see that the photographer is almost invisible, even though it's a painting, but because there is no direct interaction. They're so comfortable with the presence of the camera that it's the photographer and the camera has become almost invisible. And then this kind of allows for this quiet contemplation that you see in these compositions of, let's say, this man who is just sitting there contemplating that glass with the the evening light and the shadow of the glass falling on the stick, right? And the softness of that 4 o'clock golden light falling on his face. So that kind of automatically may not be your idea of leisure, but it brings a lot of comfort to the viewer, perhaps, or it kind of reflects on a time where you have nothing to do and you can just sit there and enjoy that moment. Or the second picture, which looks like a courtyard of a village house, right? Which is very crowded scene of like domestic animals, a grandfather, a granddaughter, grandmother, and that's again that evening light. So again, it's not a direct activity-based leisure, but just a quiet portrait, a family portrait, like I said, can be seen sometimes as something a people at leisure. And obviously the light and the shadow and all of these things, which are more compositional elements, which are down to the photographer's perspective. So I think I'm not one to give many tips. So I think the only tip in my presentation is always photograph from a place of love, because I think that is something that any viewer can interpret and read, because only love has only one reading. So my only tip would be like, go photograph, enjoy yourself, and photograph from a place of love.
Considering we have two categories, one is camera and one is cell phone, is there any suggestion or advice that you like to give them?
See, I would say my suggestion, both with the camera and the photography, like I think in the camera you have a lot in a mobile phone, because the mobile phone is easy and invisible almost. You can actually use that in you have greater maneuverability, and it becomes less of an intrusion because people are used to the camera phone. So use that in your advantage. I would say always and you should have a sort of clear idea of what you're trying to do, or a couple of ideas of things that you want to explore as a subject. Like I said, who are you and what is your choice of subject? Once you have that, then start closing your eyes and kind of visualizing it, and then take some pictures and then explore that, and then is it expressing what you're trying to say, and then just keep on doing that and editing it till you come up with one or two pictures that you really like. With the camera, you might have to be more direct because it's something visible, and with DSLRs, they're larger. So there you might have to build an intimacy, make the person feel comfortable with being photographed. Maybe find out a little bit about them and tell them about why you're photographing. Tell them just always create that connection. Then it is actually one of the easiest ways to get a better